My name is Catherine. I'm lying in this hospital bed, looking at the man sitting beside me, and I'm still in shock. Just a moment ago, the surgeon told me that a woman claiming to be my mother came to the hospital and tried to have me discharged early, right after I flatlined on the operating table. And now, this kind-looking man is sitting here, telling me he's the one who paid my hospital bill. I remember when I first woke up in the recovery room. I was groggy and confused, and there was a nurse sitting beside me. I asked her if my parents had come. The look she gave me was something I'll never forget. It wasn't exactly pity, but it was close. She started to tell me that my emergency contacts had been called and someone had come to the hospital, but then the surgeon walked in. He was Dr. Miller, a calm man with tired eyes and a steady voice. He pulled a chair close to my bed and sat down. I knew right away this wasn't going to be a routine post-surgery update. He said, "Catherine, you had a very serious night. We almost lost you." I nodded, I already knew that. Then he dropped the bombshell. "A woman claiming to be your mother came to this hospital tonight. She tried to have you discharged early." I thought I misheard him. Discharged early? I had just flatlined. He continued, "She was told it wasn't possible given your condition." She became argumentative with the staff. I felt the room tilt a bit. Then he paused, glanced towards the door, and said, "But the man who paid your bill said." And just then, the door opened. Standing in the doorway was a man I'd never seen before. He was in his late 50s, with broad shoulders, wearing a simple brown jacket and khaki trousers. His eyes were kind, the kind that seemed to understand a lot without being overbearing. He stepped inside slowly, as if he wasn't sure he had the right to be there. Dr. Miller stood up, nodded at him respectfully, and left the room, leaving the two of us alone. I pulled my hospital blanket up a bit out of instinct and asked him who he was. He sat down in the chair Dr. Miller had just vacated and folded his hands. He said his name was Mr. Thompson. He told me he was in the hospital that night visiting his sister on another floor when he overheard the commotion at the front desk. My mother, he said, was loudly demanding that I be released because my cousin's engagement party was in the morning and the whole family needed to be there. The nurses refused, explaining that I was in critical post-operative care and discharging me could cost me my life. My mother's response was to ask if there was paperwork she could sign to override the medical decision. Mr. Thompson watched all this from a distance. He said something inside him shifted, something he couldn't explain. He quietly asked the nurse what was going on with the patient. The nurse couldn't share details, but he saw enough. He saw that no family member came to sit with me. He saw my mother leave the building. He then walked to the billing desk and found out that I had no one present and that my insurance had a gap that would create an immediate financial hold on my continued care. Without hesitation, he paid the bill. Just like that, a stranger paid my hospital bill so the staff could continue treating me without any administrative issues. I was speechless. I'd just been told that my mother tried to pull me out of the hospital bed when I was on the verge of death so she could attend a party. And now, this man, whose last name I didn't even know a few minutes ago, was sitting beside me, having ensured my survival. I started to cry, the kind of ugly, broken cry that comes from deep within. Mr. Thompson didn't try to stop me or say everything was fine. He just sat there, and that was exactly what I needed. Let me go back to how this all started. It was around 3 a.m. On a Friday. I'd been feeling off all night. There was a dull ache in my lower left side, but I kept thinking it was just indigestion or something I ate. But at 3 a.m. that dull ache turned into excruciating pain. I couldn't stand up, I could barely breathe. I was sweating through my pajamas, shaking uncontrollably, and gripping the edge of my bedroom dresser as I stared at my reflection, feeling like I was watching a stranger fall apart. I knew something was terribly wrong. I grabbed my phone and called my mom. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. I called my dad. It went straight to voicemail. I kept calling back and forth between them, my hands shaking so much that I could hardly tap the screen. By the 15th call, I was lying on my living room floor, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to that same voicemail greeting I'd heard so many times. You've reached Robert Johnson. Leave a message. I left 3 messages, each more desperate than the last. In the last one, I was crying so hard that I'm not even sure the words came out right. I said, Dad, I think I'm dying. Please come. But nobody came. What happened next, I only know because the paramedics told me later. My neighbor, Mrs. Green, an elderly woman in her 70s who I'd only said hello to a few times, heard me through the thin wall. She heard me collapse and called 911. By the time the ambulance arrived, I was barely conscious. The paramedics said my appendix had burst. They said that if I'd stayed on that living room floor for another 20 minutes, the outcome would have been very different. They didn't say the word death directly, but I understood what they meant. I was rushed into emergency surgery. On the operating table, my heart stopped. I flatlined. The surgical team managed to bring me back, but for a brief moment, I was gone. There was no white light, no voices. Just a deep, absolute silence, and then suddenly, there was noise again. Machines beeping, someone calling my name, and an unbearable pain in my chest from the compressions. Later that day, my parents finally arrived. My mom walked in first and said she hadn't heard her phone because it was on silent. 15 calls, and she said she hadn't heard them. Then she looked around the room and asked why there was a vase of flowers on the windowsill. Mr. Thompson had left them before going back to his sister. I told her a stranger had bought them. She said, that's strange. She never asked why a stranger was involved. My father stood near the door the whole time, with his arms crossed, nodding at what my mother said, never once sitting down beside me. They stayed for about half an hour and then left because, as my mom put it, there was still a lot of cleaning up to do after the engagement party. She said my cousin had a wonderful time and that I would have loved it. After they left, I lay in that hospital bed and made a decision. I decided that I was done trying to fit myself into a family that never really wanted me. I was done sacrificing my well-being for their expectations. Mr. Thompson visited me 2 more times before I was discharged. On the last visit, he brought his wife, Mrs. Thompson. She was a warm and kind woman. She held my hand and said, "You have people, dear. You just haven't met all of them yet." I think about that sentence every day. I found out later through the nurses that Mr. Thompson had also formally reported my mother's discharge attempt to the hospital's patient advocacy office. He didn't tell me himself, he wasn't the kind of man who needed credit for doing the right thing. The hospital documented it, which meant that if anything had gone wrong that night due to outside interference, there was a record. I'm fully recovered now. My relationship with my parents is still a work in progress. The fog has lifted on who they really are and who I needed them to be. They are 2 very different things, and for a long time, I was confused. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson have become the family I always wanted, the kind defined by action and presence, not by blood and obligation. If this story reaches you, I want you to know that the people who show up for you in your darkest moments, even if they're strangers, are the ones who show you what real love looks like. Sometimes, nearly losing your life is what it takes to realize whose hands were never really holding you. If this story moved you, please subscribe to this channel. Every week, we bring you true stories of survival, betrayal, unexpected kindness, and the kind of human strength that doesn't make headlines but should. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and become part of a community that believes real stories deserve to be heard. You matter, and so does every story we tell. This story is dedicated to every person who has ever called for help and heard silence. You are not forgotten.